Another thing I like to do for them, stiff-legged deadlifts. This is another exercise that I'm really thinking about the squeeze on the glutes. I know I say that all the time, but I really can't stress it enough how important the squeeze is, and really having that mind-muscle connection between the body part you're working. So in this case, the glutes.
Okay, so now he's doing a deadlift, right? And he's doing it for, quote, hamstrings and glutes. So let's figure out how much of each is happening here. His primary bending spot is right there, right? Which means he's elongating his glutes, and as he comes up, he's contracting his glutes. So the question is, how much hamstring is here? Well, we know he's not bending his knee. So if you look at an anatomy chart, you'll see that 3 of the 4 bands of fibers that constitute the hamstrings, 3 of the 4 don't cross the hip joint. 1 crosses the hip joint. So, and it's mostly the inner part of that hamstring. So you really can't, you can feel a stretch when you do that, but you're not going to get the kind of activation of the hamstring from a deadlift that you can from a leg curl. I've seen some beautiful hamstrings with just leg curls. So if the deadlift was an essential part of hamstring development, we wouldn't see that. And yet we see it all the time. Beautiful hamstrings with just leg curls. Now, when you do a squat, you're also activating that inner part of that hamstring, the same part of the hamstring that's activated with a deadlift. So again, if you're doing squats and you're doing leg curls, you're already hitting all parts of the hamstring. But yes, I agree that this is a really, really great glute exercise. He's clearly bent over farther than he would be on a squat. He's got more of a pike position here than he would on a squat. So there's a more full of a range motion on the glutes on this exercise than there is on a squat.
I think it's really important to go down all the way to your toes.
Now he says it's important to go down to your toes. So I always tell people this. It's like, let's not use any markers or indicators of where the range of motion ends that are not appropriate for the movement, right? So a lot of times someone is doing a curl and they use as an indicator when this dumbbell touches their shoulder, right? Well, that has nothing to do with your elbow bending. The indicator is a fully bent elbow. The indicator here would be a fully flexed hip, or a fully extended hip, excuse me. So if you're doing this, you're going to obviously do things that compromise the form just because you're using an indicator that isn't necessarily the right one. So I wouldn't necessarily say worry about coming down to your toes. What I would say is use your mind to muscle connection, pay attention to that glute. When you feel that glute maximally bend, that hip joint maximally bend, that movement is done. It doesn't matter where the bar is. It doesn't matter where your hands are. Nothing else matters other than that joint. That joint has to be fully extended and then fully flexed. Actually here, it's called being flexed, but when he stands up, it'll be extended.
I keep the weight about 2 inches, 2.5 inches off my shins. You'll see a lot of guys loading this thing up with 275 pounds. But
one thing I do like is keeping his back very flat, right? So he's protecting his spine. And he talked about keeping that bar close to his shin. That is going to further protect his spine. If he lets that bar come out, it's going to load up his spine much more.
I think it's important just back off the weight. I don't go past 135, 185 pounds on these. I prefer the barbell versus the dumbbell version. It's just more of a comfortable move for me, and I feel it more in my hamstring. I can get...
Again, I just want to emphasize that just because a person looks good doing an exercise doesn't mean that exercise is good. What I would recommend for you out there is try this exercise, pay attention to how it feels, pay attention to your form, don't go too heavy, make sure your back feels comfortable. Not everyone can do this exercise, by the way. If you've got lower back problems, you might not be able to do it. I would say no big loss. You can get plenty of hamstring development and plenty of glute development from your squats and your leg curls. But again, it's common to see someone like this in the gym and go, that's the secret exercise. That isn't necessarily the case. This guy could brush his teeth. And you'd say, wow, that's the secret to a beautiful physique. Like, he just looks great. He's worked hard, he's got good genetics, but not everything that a person who looks good does is necessarily equally productive.